Welcome everyone. So today we are looking at all of the changes the Sentinel is getting in patch 1.0. So there is quite a bit of stuff changing. Probably the biggest thing is going to be Healing Hands actually having skills now. So as a baseline, Healing Hands is an ability which casts a medium-sized area of effect which heals all allies, including yourself, for a immediate burst and applies a heal over time for 3 seconds. Now both heals from the ability scale with increased healing effectiveness as well as the nodes on the skill tree. This grants Healing Hands not only a strong immediate recovery, but also it provides a fairly strong heal over time to help keep yourself and allies nice and healthy. As a paladin, Healing Hands can offer very strong competition to even Life Leech as the source of health sustain, in addition to its specialized options. Let's go over those specialized options that you can do with Healing Hands now. So the first one is Cleric's Hammer. Now Cleric's Hammer grants Healing Hands a chance to trigger on any melee attack up to 100% chance with the full 4 points assigned. Now this imbues all melee attacks to provide healing to all allies and yourself in the area. When combined with other options on the tree, this can also effectively convert any melee attack into an offensive spell melee attack, synergizing very well with many of the Paladin's hybrid melee and spell abilities. Now next up is Hand of Aurelius. More favorable towards ranged damage, Hand of Aurelius allows Healing Hands to instead synergize with Direct Smite cast, adding its own healing area to smites. Combined with Searing Light, adding damage to Healing Hands' area of effect, Healing Hands can further augment smite builds with the additional hit damage. I think this one is the one that I'm going to go for. I'm really liking this one. Next up we have Divine Bolt. Healing Hands also adds support for Divine Bolts. By picking up Divine Catalyst node, you will cast a number of Divine Bolts with every direct use of Healing Hands. Further, with just 1 point in this node, all sources of Divine Bolt will scale with the nodes in the Healing Hands tree. Next up we have Chariot. Healing Hands can also be converted to a transversal ability, charging to a target location, casting Healing Hands upon arrival. Now this adds a 6-second cooldown to Healing Hands. However, unlike Lunge, Chariot does not require a target to move to. So in Lunge you have the option to move towards an ally, or you can move towards an enemy. With Chariot you can move regardless anywhere you want to. Next up is Seraph Blade. Prefer to channel your healing powers through your blade? Taking this node will convert Healing Hands into a melee attack, converting spell damage from the tree into a melee damage. A heavy hitting melee attack which also provides strong healing. Seraph Blade embodies the strongest aspects of the Paladin Mastery. And lastly we have Unbroken Prayer Skyfall. Now this looks epic. By assigning Unbroken Prayer, converting Healing Hands into a channeled ability, you can further specialize it into Skyfall. By paying an additional mana cost each second, you will deal additional fire damage over time while channeling Healing Hands, scorching clear a path of the righteous. So I know a couple of enemies cast what it looks like Skyfall already in the game, so us getting the ability to use that is going to be awesome. So next up, let's look at some skills and passive changes that they have made to the Sentinel. So Erasing Strike now has 550% added damage effectiveness from 450. Mark of the End has a 100% chance to shred enemy, void resistance from 25%. Void beams cast by Eraser Strike deal 20% more damage per second, and the void beams in the tree now have clear descriptions. For Forward Strike now has 500% added damage effectiveness from 400. Now provides a sub-skill tooltip for summon weapon, and Clarified Sphere Forge to say it deals damage in a smaller area. Hammer Throw fixed Iron Spiral, not showing the added mana cost as a downside. Now for Judgment, Pious Offering grants 3% more damage per 2 mana consumed, from 2% more damage per 1 mana consumed. Sacred Sword grants 50% ignite chance on hit. For Lunge, fixed Spelling Mistake. Lead the Charge explains the effects happening at the end. Voidbringer shows the correct time rot info. Rough Cuts clarifies that it only affects the hits along the path, not the final hit. For Multi-Strike, Armaments is highlighted in the main description. Armament stacks now show more info such as max default stacks and durations. Echoed Warfare now clarifies what echoes are. Now Rebuke got the most changes here. Now has an 8-second cooldown from 5. Protective Legacy, buffs persist after channeling, is changed to be half the channel duration from the full channel duration. Burst of Speed grants haste for half the channel duration from increased movement speed for the half channel duration. Solemn Vow grants 15% increased duration from 20 and has a maximum of 2 points allocable from 5. Added a new node behind Retaliation called Reclaimed Refuge that recovers some of the Rebuke's remaining cooldown on melee hits with other attacks. Added a new node behind Mystic Ages called Stoic Challenge that adds an additional charge to Rebuke. Inner Focus now has 3 points allocable. Battle Meditation grants 30% increased mana regen from 25. Augmented Plating grants 15% more armor from 25 increased. Redemption grants 25 healing per second from 15. Accelerated Healing grants 20% increased healing from Redemption from 15. Wildfire Shell has more info about Spreading Flames, and Spreading Flames deals 43% more damage over its duration, and its tooltip has more clear info about its effect. Ring of Shield's collateral damage now provides a sub-skill tooltip for Shrapnel, and clarified displacement wording to say target location. Now Ryze got some changes as well. Remove the Opportunist node, more crit chance against ignited enemies, they got rid of that. Added a new node, Scrap Metal. Whenever you summon a forged weapon, causes you to gain a stack of scrap metal buff instead. Now each stack grants 3% more armor and 3% more Rive damage and lasts 10 seconds. The duration can be modified by modifiers to forged weapons duration. It requires 1 point foe cleaver. And lastly here for Rive hitbox shape optimized. They said this is a very slight buff. Now for Shield Rush, Void Beams cast by Shield Rush deal 25% more damage per second. The Void Beams in the tree now have a clear description. Smelter's Wrath, your armor is doubled while channeling Smelter's Wrath. Now for Smite, nodes related to Fissure now provide the correct sub-skill tooltip, and Fissure itself is better explained. Vengeance, Iron Blades are now affected by nodes on the tree. Double Reposit mitigates 18% less damage from 16, and Dark Duelist is now 4% more global damage while preparing from 20% increased. Lastly is Warpath. Juggernaut Stance explains in the alt text that you can block without needing a shield. Reckless Spin explains that you can mitigate the elemental resistance reduction with gears and passives. And Forge Master's Stance now provides a sub-skill tooltip for forged weapons. Now moving on to passive changes, there isn't much for the Sentinel. The only thing they have here is Juggernaut grants 4% fire and void resistance per point from the 3%. So the last thing for Sentinel changes for patch 1.0 is going to be the class items. So for body armor, added a new starting Sentinel body armor, Ringmail, which grants 50 armor and required level 1. Infantry Hauberk requires level 1. Worn Plate now grants 75 armor from 45 and it requires level 4. Iron Plant has been renamed to Iron Cuirass and requires level 13. Full Plate grants 165 armor from 145 and requires level 19 from 28. Added a new Sentinel body armor forged plate which grants 210 armor and 21 to 35% physical resistance and requires level 29. Noble Plate grants 240 armor from 210 and 12 to 36% lightning resistance from 10 to 25. Myrmidon Plate grants 280 armor from 240 and 25 to 60% increased crit chance from 20 to 60 and requires level 53. Augury Plate grants 475 armor from 350 and 18 to 35% increased mana regen from 10 to 25 and requires level 59 from 70. Solarum Plate grants 420 armor from 310 and 20 to 80% increased fire damage from 15 to 50. Requires level 68. Replace Dawn Plate with Apocalypse Plate which grants 513 armor, 113 to 253 stun avoidance, and 13 to 130% increased echo damage and requires level 79. Nice. Added a new Sentinel body armor Champion Regalia which grants 700 armor and 10 to 17 of armor mitigation applies to damage over time. Now that's for the armor. For the helmets, we have Battered Helmet has been renamed to Leather Helmet and grants 35 armor from 30. Infantry Helm requires level 3. Added a new Sentinel Helmet, Arena Helmet, which grants 50 armor and 10 to 20% fire resistance and requires level 6. Iron Visor grants 56 armor from 45, 12 to 26 increased stun chance. Full Helm requires level 20. Added a new Sentinel Helmet, Spiked Helmet, which grants 70 armor, 12 to 27% physical resistance, and 12 to 27 increased physical damage and requires level 27. Winged Helm requires level 40, love those. Myrmidon Helm grants 125 armor from 150 and requires level 51. Augury Helm grants 260 armor from 225, 6 to 10 increased cooldown recovery speed from 5 to 10, and 16 to 42 void resistance from 10 to 25, requires level 60. Replace Dawn Helm armor with Solarum Great Helm, which grants 365 armor, 15 to 75 endurance threshold, and 15 to 75 increased fire damage. Replace Solarum Helm armor, endurance, and threshold and fire damage with Terror Crown, which grants 313 armor, 1 to 7 vitality, and 13 to 130 increased echo damage, and requires level 80. And lastly here for the Sentinel Helms, added a new Sentinel helmet, Leonin Great Helm, I think that's how you say that, which grants 550 armor and 50 to 85% reduced bonus damage taken from crits, and requires level 85. So those are the big things happening to the Sentinels. We're going to have a little bit of skill changes, passive changes, and of course we're getting healing hands, which is going to be huge, which is going to open up a lot of doors for new builds and just, you know, a completely new way to play with those different nodes that are inside the healing hands tree, Skyfall, Seraphs, all kinds of stuff. So we're going to see, I think a lot of people are going to be playing Sentinel. I'm sure a lot of people are also going to be playing Warlock because, you know, that's going to be unlocked as well. So those are all of your changes for the Sentinel coming up at 1.0. So you are caught up, you know exactly what's changing with the Sentinel. That's going to be it for me. Thank you guys for sitting through, hanging out with me, and, you know, looking at the different changes that are going to be happening. So you guys have a great one. Hopefully I'll see you in game.